establish in chamber music the piano entrance, like in the Franck Sonata, you want to establish a sound carpet which will give the other instrument with whom you dialogue, violin or sometimes flute, cello, even double bass and probably more, since it's very popular sonata for all instruments besides the original violin for which it was written by Franck, dedicated to Isaïe for his wedding as a gift. And the first movement was to symbolize the meeting of the two young lovers, and then the second movement is the passionate love life of their first year of marriage, and afterwards there is the third movement, which is supposed to represent a little bit of distanciation between the two. And then the last movement in canon is when they walk together hand in hand towards their future. So it's a bit of a program idea that he had in mind, but that's not essential for the sonata. What is essential is that the piano part, since he was an organist and composer, of course, is a lot of symphonic and polyphonic part. So the importance in chamber music is for the chamber music partner to always hear he or herself constantly, even when in miscellaneous parts. And so first and foremost in the opening first movement, since the theme of the Franck Sonata is melodically as a leitmotif of an ascending third. In the second movement, opening, the theme is ascending. So you want to hint it in the very introduction with a little crescendo, when then it becomes a fifth or the sixth, and then the violin enters. Also, another important thing the pianist has to do in chamber music is keep the pulse, is the conductor, but so discreetly, not imposingly, so that when the violinist, in this case, would need more time for rubato, the pianist has the capacity to always, since we have the GPS full parts and not just the violin part, we see the whole picture, then we have to always let the forward tempo go. For instance, if the violinist goes and takes its time to finish the first singing fair phrase, since the literally melodic line is what is the embodiment of the violin part. And sometimes by the virtue of technique, necessity, bowing, vibrato, quality of delay of some note, and or glissando, whatever it is that it takes, they might be like an opera singer, take their time. The pianist is to maintain discreetly the pulse by playing the next bar on the time. And suggested, like here in the opening chorale, like in the organ, pedal-like organ with the deep basses, the melodic movement, to observe also the descending third, in this case, compared to the opening. So it's always about melodic thirds. And since the choral writing for the piano is a lot of downbeat notes, like the harmonies, even if the melodic bass is to be followed melodically, there's still chords on the beats. And the violin plays long, short, or the 6/8. So it's it's kind of cradling. So therefore, the pianist has to count always the weak beats, the ones that are not played or implemented by notes. In this case, mostly second and fifth, eighth note. So we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 2, feel the impulse of the note on which you would stay if you don't move as you do. Because if you think on the beat, every beat, like on the grooves, will be little and a little and a little more deep in the groove, and so instead of flowing very gracefully forward, you end up by stagnating and possibly going backwards. And as I like to say, unfortunately, often slow tempi are not slow, they just get slower. And so in order to maintain that very gentle but slow motion forward, you have to maintain 2, 5, 2, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4. In other words, you always think in your mind the beat which is not played. So, I'm ready flat. Fa, la, sol, sol, fa, re, do, si, fa, fa, sol, si, la, si, si, mi, sa, la, re, do, si, si, fa, mi, si, si, do, mi, fa, 5, 4, 5, 6, 1, la, do, la, fa, re, do, fa, la. And towards the arrival on the first dominant establishment, E major, first peak. That's the last one. The first one is. So you arrive at the point where the violin will take a little bit more time. So the difficulty is to maintain the emotion and the motion, but not to succumb to the easy task of overstating every note, even if it's very intense, which the piano cannot do in the sense of each syllable very heavily said. It has to be more in a flow, always. A violin can do it because they have vibrato and sustained bow, and so the sustained, like voiced, and on the piano we need to remain melodic. If not, it becomes percussive because of the hammers and the length of sound, even though the pedal isn't always there. And always follow the melodic bass with a melody on top and inside softer. I call them tutti. In fact, the solo piano part where the piano is by itself very intense and emotional and free actually, because no violin plays. But in the last of the tuttis is an echo of it, and he plays. Problem of a composer as Franck, who thinks as organist in displayed stretches, and most pianists, some could, some can a few, but can't really pluck all the. So we have to arpeggiate, and the problem with the arpeggiation is that it interferes with the pulse. It dilutes it into delays, so you have to manage to arpeggiate when you need to, rhythmically. And if it's a bit too dry, then you can a little bit display it. But if it is dotted, oh sorry, the long and short rhythm. It's nothing to do with some students complain their hand isn't long enough, large enough, or their fingers long enough. Some others think it's too long because they cannot play something. One way or the other, nobody's satisfied with what they have. But I think musically, we can very well implement the different amount of layered elements, even if we delay slightly with a rhythmic arpeggio with bass before the beat, and then the harmony on the beat. And if it's arpeggiated a bit tighter, then that's all it takes. In any case, you want to make sure that again you leave the spectrum of the sound for the soundscape that is global with the other instrument clear and almost transparent, so that you don't overwhelm with the richness of the overtone or the harmonics of the overtones or the piano or the modern piano, the big piano, to the point to which that richness of resonances would sort of sink the solo violin part into it and just always voice the top of the arpeggio with the melody. Basically, it's like the contours of the melodic line. So you highlight it, and the rest of the fill up you play softer to avoid. Even if the dynamic marking says forte for the piano part or fortissimo equal to the violin, you have to think of it intense mezzo piano. But from close up with voicing that highlights the blossoming of top of the harmony, so you present them as a bouquet. Flowers with highlights of colors instead of just bunched, which is when the partner says it's too loud or too thick or too big or whatever they use, and then you have to put the unichord and stifle and you feel frustrated as a pianist, as a chamber partner, and the chamber partner feels the piano is too overwhelming because the part by itself is written as such. Not to mention the modern piano is very rich and in length of sound as well, compared to, let's say, Franck's 1800s, late 1900s piano, which was more of a harp-like. So we have to find in piano touch just one or other note to highlight and the rest to play in the shadow, so it gives the three-dimensional aspect of the richness of the texture without the thickness of the texture, which is always overwhelming for the balance with the other instrument. In order to play proactively and the fruition of each sound and harmony without the impression that they will be too loud, therefore I have to put the unicorda and just stifle myself, because then I don't have the energy of the sound, the direction of the line, the impact of the production of the sound, which needs to have its effect musically, the tension, the harmony. In other words, it's not a volume that you put down like on the radio at home to play softer in texture, no, nor in dynamics. It's more about choosing, voicing, sculpting, presenting a soundscape on which the other voice completes and feels there is room to breathe in terms of the resonance of the sound, and not having to fight the intensity of the piano part, which is easy to do. We have so much richness of the harmonies compared to one melodic voice, as beautiful as it is. So we need to find the way to sort of hug the instrument without to choke the instrument with our amount of notes to play, which is important to practice as a solo piano piece, just like we would do a solo piano sonata by Beethoven, to prepare the violin sonata by Franck for all the opportunities in life a pianist will have to play it with flute piano and violin piano, cello piano, something piano, but always prepared and knowledgeable, and not just having to read it quickly and not figuring out until later with experience what to present, what to withhold, what to show. Nothing to hide, but just to establish a certain soundscape, as I like to call it, framed. The second movement is the most difficult for that, because it has not only many notes but quick notes, and it's the expression of passion and spontaneity. Can argue the tempo speed with something more moderate, still passionate. That is a same introduction. Thankfully I play with full energy, or at least a certain fullness of energy, because there is no violin in the first page, so it's an introduction to the symphony movement. This is the same with a little bit less fast tempo. But this time with lesser pedal. Which in a resonant hall will anyway already have this of the sound, I would say even merging parts together and allowing for a certain resonant togetherness, while the melodic line has to rise with the repeated note for the anticipation, impatience of the impetuous, passionate movement. Of course, the pianist needs to finger with change of finger, like 1, 3, 2, and have the second of the two repeated notes be louder, because it's the appoggiatura of the syncopation to go. And this repeated note has to be crisp. I suggest a low wrist. And the jolt of the wrist up at the repeat. Because in the demonstration I really look like an opening a bottle, but in fact it's lesser gesture in the real. Just to give that momentum. And the 16th notes that pass from the left hand to the right hand, the cascade. I would play air legato and let the pedal or light fuzzes of pedal but I wouldn't play every 16th note articulated like some kind of giant insects. Because then it will prevail over the melody, which is embedded inside the harmony. And even when the violin will enter after this introduction page, Franck has the violin playing also in the middle of the piano's spectrum, if you want. This beautifully, strongly, but vulnerably strong fourth string that gives width of sound to compared to the higher strings, which are more thin and more projecting, or perhaps a little bit more metallic. The violin here has this kind of mezzo-soprano, quasi-alto voice, which gives it a warmth and passion, but it's important for the piano not to observe the forte or fortissimo marking. When the violin comes in, you shut down from the introduction dynamic and you play in what I call involved piano, which means you don't want to play piano just sort of shut off the dynamics and just play. macaroni on ivory and just no. You have to play as intense, meaning the energy of the depressing, what you do when you play fast, and loud. And this time you'll play fast, deep, but not loud. Just the energy of the finger. In order to allow the violin sound to be heard, not only, but tasted, heard, tested, all the sensual aspects of it, and to hear it instead of squeezing it into your own playing of the theme, plus the accompaniment, plus the pedal for the harmony, then it's you sync the violin. Rather, and I suggest to use less pedal in order to play not dry, to play finger pedal. So the air legato practiced 16th notes will become less air and a little bit overstaying their welcome. So you satisfy the harmonization without to overwhelm the texture. Have the energy of the sound production, you want to have the harmonization without the loudness of the dampers up that allow for so much more resonance for just those few notes to have all the other of the 88. And so you want to control your vibration, you want to control your energy in terms of production of the energy, minus the weight, therefore minus the volume, loud volume. And not as an accompanist would, in the bad sense of the word, accompanist shut down the energy of the playing in order just to be soft at any price. Very often is that, or so either or, loud or soft. No, it should be active and so intensely whispered. Can use the opportunity to play in depth the bass, because the bass doesn't overwhelm the melodic line. But since it's always starting on a syncopation, da 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 down the upbeat, you have to establish the downbeat of the left hand, because there is no syncopation feeling if you don't have a downbeat feeling to contrast or balance it. So if you play, it all feels like seasick, everything is always rising, but I never have a settled moment, and the settled is the bass. It doesn't have to be that loud, but it has to be deep. Provided you played through the first page by yourself the introduction of the stormy movement, Sturm und Drang, and secondly, you play the second page with the violin in unison inside but with transparencies around, then comes the more easy section for balance, when the violin is rising and soaring like a bird in the high sky. Then it's balance, less problem with the piano, pure balance, but you have to prepare this with a chordal section that he does. It's a bridge. You're like cruising, and they have just a light arpeggio in the right hand, a deep basses, organ kind, pedal organ, and the violin is on the top singing, so the whole spectrum is spread, but at the same time defined by instrument, almost to say. is if the two hands had two instruments to be, but one piano, but in the space. Whenever this bridge in between the two, this chorale of chords based on the pivotal tritone, one day after many times playing it and always obsessed with the melodic ascending third, this is the beginning and everywhere. These chords, which always played chordal because they are written without stems. This beautiful harmony, C sharp, D flat, C. The inharmonic chromaticism is very talking to me and to anybody. It has kind of a drive of energy and at the same time something withholding because the C sharp leading tone to D and then D flat dropping, tension release, and preparing the F major relative, in which violin will soar. And so one day, with Patrice Fontana-Rosa in my academy in France, I was rehearsing it before a concert, and just spontaneously in my little bit of inventive voice leading ideas, creative voice leadings that are sort of not hinted by the composer, I voiced alternative in each chord the combination of ascending melodic third. While the violin plays, the violin has FA, and I would have this. Perhaps it's embedded in the, for sure, subconscious of Franck. But he didn't write it with stems like that. And then I remember Patrice Fontana-Rosa, who knows this piece so well, having played it even longer than me. And like all violinists, of course, they used to hear this magma of sound that pianists play, since it's written for like a very fruity sound. And he was like, "Do you play the notes?" And I like that little suggestion because it appeared like I was playing either different notes, either not the right notes, because I was using the chord instead of being just bluntly, and sometimes it's beautiful blunt as well. I played, which contrasted or sort of complemented the thirds of the violin. So it's my little personal sort of injection of thematically enhanced imaginary voice leading, but I don't know even how to call it. It doesn't even have a word. It's just called silliness. But even if not played as much out as now I had to demonstrate it, it can be brought up a little more discreetly. So. Pianistically, for an organist, displays in his writing their arpeggios into tenths, into more than that, and the right hand needs to use the middle finger, mostly the second finger, as a pivot, and just play around it in order to be light and precise and not heavy and accented. So obviously, for most of the time, one has to reach the stretched arpeggio, and if the middle finger in question, the second finger, is straight and the palm is higher but not higher than the wrist, it allows for upper rotation, so you pass quickly on the top rather than sideways if you have a lower position of the palm and then the fingers are more bent. It reminds me of the technique Chopin uses in the Etude Opus 10 number 9, but in the left hand. It is necessary to keep, in this case, the third finger straighter. Of course, it's the longest finger, and the two short fingers, the thumb and 5, play above. You just touch with the tips, and you just sort of tip the center note. in the upper rotation, and here it's so it allows for agility and lesser gesture and passing over like the hypotenusis. You just don't go around, but you just go to through the short stretch, and at the same time you have a precision of the touch because you're closer to the fingers, to the keys of the distant fingers stretched in the position. Of course, if it was written as a accompaniment of the 18th century, it's all very close, so you don't have to have this. It's not an Alberti bass or an Alberti bass as if stretched. And so it's it allows for a more voluble playing and velocity especially. So the shaking pedal helps so much, because if not, full harmonization by half bar, whole bar, whatever the movement of the harmony by the rhythm in the writing becomes heavy. It has to be light. It has to be constantly kept softer from becoming harsh. So you have to have this kind of harp display with French horn harmony. It's an interesting combination, imagine it. But if you keep the pedal for the repetitivity, the redundancy makes it puffed up, and the sound becomes, it bubbles in front of you, you cannot control it, and then you have to put the left pedal to shut it down, which is almost driving on a highway with a handbrake. It's not right. You shouldn't do it. It's too loud. The other one is too stifled, so it has to. So often change the pedal. Play from close up. Play on the resonance of the sound rather than the impact of the sound. In these cases, like. And sync the basses. Soaring, and the bass is here in your right hand. Because the violin is producing the ritenuto melodically. We just caught it with the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, sextolet minus first note. And then when that section is finished, the piano has another chorale, and that's where you have to pick up the tempo. By step, pick up. In fact, the pianist is the conductor, but also the harmonizer. Basically, the pianist has to play so many things with ease, transparency, and at the same time melodic knowledge of the line and realization at which placement in the spectrum of the ranges the instrument you play with would be coverable by the texture of the piano, because obviously for the violin the high register is okay, never can be covered. Middle register easy, bottom register the most. In case in this sonata, that has to be in the mind of the pianist. If you play with a cello, in the high register it's weaker, but in the middle register it's resonant a lot. But of course it's in the human voice range, and it's different. Play with viola, we play with double bass. Of course you have to take into account which chord is covered where. If I do, so you have to always leave the space around the place where the other instrument sings, not clogged with harmonic notes. Yeah, it's almost sort of a sculptor job rather than a pianist job. And the third movement, oh god, there is a terrible coda at the end of the second movement I bypassed in my few examples now, which is... what is written, there's no point to play with a partner. That is the problem. The involvement has to be the same, the dynamic motion has to be the same, but the sheer volume has to be less and the pedal has to change more. So this is what it should be when you play chamber music friendly. To have the other instrument be not only heard but fulfill its part. That is why it's important to play this energy practice rhythms. In this case the crisp air legato comes in hand because it allows for contouring the texture instead of becoming heavy. Kind of clogging with pedal and heavy touch combined defeats the purpose. It has to be... Of course, if it's played very artificial, meaning superficial, it lacks the energy of the drive of the music. So it's not just a question of color versus meaning. The meaning of it is to be driven and profoundly flowing. So how to play the energy of the approach of each note is if you're going to play it forte but mezzo. If you don't withhold the speed of depressing the keys, you'll be appearing like you walk on your toes, like walking on eggshells, as we say. No, it really has to have this kind of fundamental drive without the weight. And the third movement is the one that has the least ensemble, so to say, because it's the one where the two heroes are apart. When you have this kind of section where you're a solo piano, or I like to call it the tutti, as if you're an orchestra for a soloist. The depth of the richness of the sound without the impact, as it shouldn't be aggressive, but it should be very, very heavy, very deep. So the support of the palm, but the very free wrist, while the palm is solidly holding the fingers, the tips of which are solidly darts deeply entered in the keys, but then the palm supports them to free the wrist, the arm, of course, and the shoulder. And also, sometimes to maintain the sound and the energy, some pianists lift the... But to release it, you release the weight down, and you support it by the palm for the straight fingers and the touch, the deep. And you can overstate the legato with the staying over the welcome. More than the pedal, the finger legato, the E flat on the D, the F in the E, and the E flat on it. Just the extra legato, legatissimo. And then the violin plays solo. So anyway, it's a long soliloquy of the violin, then the piano comes. And again the violin. And another recitative with eloquence, rhetoric, all these intervals. Again the thirds. Of heavenly tenderness. It has this kind of walking quality, like gentle but very calm, very, very far away from the passionate, confrontational, or very passionately clicking together second movement, which is really the heart of the sonata. And the finale comes as this kind of in storytelling happy end, and they lived on forever after, and he had many children. It's almost like an anthem, almost like a Franck anthem of the country of Franck. It sounds like that, a popular tune, but happy and relieved and mostly serene and absolutely content, probably even with a sense of plenitude. And the violin playing in canon with the piano till the end, in the sense of obedience to a spouse to another, which is very old-fashioned ways of thinking, but that's how they conceived marriage in the 19th century. So these elements in the piano are on octaves, which by itself already is one too many compared to the solo violin part. Not to mention on top of that or around it in the piano part, the harmonization. So that's why it's very important to play one of the two voices of the octave a little softer. Or it doesn't have to be demonstrative as much, meaning as much disbalanced. But it shouldn't be bluntly the both, because that dubs too much for the richness of the harmonics of the modern piano compared to the violin. So perhaps I would say for the top octave, I still think. Highlight the top. And follow the cello. Consequently, when the violinists complain that they don't hear themselves, it's not so much because the piano sound dwells or swells on the spot like they can do themselves with the vibrato. It's so to say to imitate. It's because we have the impact. Once we impact the sound, it's decaying, but the attack is usually the moment where the piano, for a nano moment, is say the spark of sound that is incomparably beautiful, meaning no orchestra sound has that. No orchestration colorization has this impact. Well, I speak as a pianist. But for that we have to be very aware if it's a very tender melodic line, as it is at the end of this tremendously tumultuous sonata, to have this serene ending. Or this upbeat starting, and whatever the phrase starts from, not to impact from above the key, but trigger the sound from inside the key. It makes a major difference in the balance. It's not the loudness, it's the impact of the energy of the drive of the production of the sound, the spark. And you can play it, or you can play, that's a major difference. You have to play soft, you just have to play deep from inside the key and deepen in the keys. Over the sounds, and you avoid the percussive aspect, which is so pianistic, of the attack. Of course, it's percussive per se, but it is in comparison to the legato of the violin that is incomparably singing like a voice, and the piano has to sort of metamorphose itself to become another string instrument or even voices. Passing tones in eighth notes lighter. I'll give you an example. If not, it'll sound compared to minus the violin here right now today is difficult to compare, because of course the essential part isn't with us, the partner is not here, we're just preparing for the partner. But I think if we prepare the terrain as we prepare beautifully this soundscape with energy but not attack. Ascension of the soul and the spirit, and the idea that the fulfillment is full, is nothing can stop this rising sun. And I think it brings the whole sonata to a fulfillment, and I must say that then in retrospect, the shy, emotional calls for each other, the two partners meeting musically, inviting each other to sing through the tumultuous. And then the solo, the recitativo, almost holding hands. I think this sonata is really very much of another four seasons of life, or at least different aspects of expression, of emotion, of uplifting of spirits, and naturally it's much more than a soprano with harp. It's more about an organist with chorale melody. Since Franck was an organist and composed so many pieces which are so much more church music-like, in the sense that they're a little more austere than this sonata, which is extremely sensual in the best sense of the word. Like the Prélude chorale and fugue and other pieces he composed, where it's more like it's in the middle. The melody, the chorale, it's written really like a Bach chorale, but of course with the romantic, late romantic, early modern days, 20th century almost, beginning of it, end of 19th. Harmonizations. In the sonata, it becomes, for the violin sonata, it's extremely driven, emotional, and extroverted more than his other works, even if they are already with an enormous lyrical intensity, but more spiritual than perhaps sensual. And the combination of violin and piano give this sonata sort of like a cinemascope view of life, as some kind of depicting, narrating an epic story. So I think that the pianist who will prepare for the sonata in terms of a pianistic practice, how to implement all this richness of the texture without to have to sacrifice in terms of volume purely, as if it's a volume thing, which is not, is to highlight the voices in order to allow the partner to hear himself or herself, to highlight them structure by the voicing or possibly by the pedaling too, to keep it always with energy in the production of the sound, but without the automatic weight that makes it loud and clogged, as like too much harmonies. Not that there are too many, it's just that they have to be all there but not thick, and at the same time maintain this overall vision of the two parts constantly in mind. I was singing with my falsetto voice, but naturally it's good to at least say it to oneself when you practice the piano part, the partner part, so that you really know each other's parts to the point to which you listen to each other while you play to yourself. It's really a marvelous life in music. Music in life. Thank you.